If we can individually and thus collectively reprogram our relationship with discomfort, actually expand the window of tolerance to lean into our resistance, to lean into our grief, to lean into our pain, and perpetually ask, what are the lessons I'm meant to learn? And we do it with refined consciousness. So the pain doesn't have to obliterate everything in our life. When you feel, discomfort, when you feel anxiety, when you feel the wave of sadness, continue to be so acutely aware of those emotional experiences, or when you feel misalignment. And you are the alchemist of your life. Like Michelle shared, like to journey inward is our highest calling. So when we reprogram our relationship with discomfort, we actually embody a greater frequency and power of who we truly are. And we smooth those ripples out because we catch it. We catch the lessons before perhaps they need to scream at us down the line.
Imagine if more and more and more and more women, especially in the divine feminine era, are having these conversations. And then we get to take this out as consciousness first into our communities. This is how we create new earth.
This is how we create new earth.
This is it right here. Lena Franklin, I feel like you're a soul sister. I'm so grateful to finally connect with you. Welcome to Fire and Soul.
Michelle, thank you so much for having me.
Ah, we were just chatting before. We're like, there's so much expansion. We're recording on the day of the new supermoon in Aquarius, and there's just so much going on. We're like, it's hard to really tell what's happening. We just know a lot is. You're feeling that too?
Totally. I feel it in my head, like I was sharing, but just in my entire body. So I feel like we're in complete alignment there.
Totally, like kindred souls of just like a little sniffles. If you hear it, fine. If we sneeze, fine. But really, it's all energetic expansion. There are so many beautiful places that I'm excited to weave with you. I've been following your journey ever since you appeared on Alice and Charles' podcast.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Yes. And she's been such a special soul, scheduled and rescheduled a few times on this show, rescheduled again. Hopefully we make it happen. But that was where I first came across your medicine. And then at that time you were hosting the Medicine Woman podcast. I think it's on hiatus or something is shifting about that, but I devoured every episode. And then I really started to pay a lot of attention to you. So before we dropped in with, what we have to offer to my listeners and viewers today, I just wanted to take a moment to honor you. I had never seen and felt a woman that looks the way that you look, your external beauty. You've been gifted by God, your parents. This lifetime, it was important for you to look the way that you look and for your heart to actually, I felt your heart and your spirit more than I saw your beauty. And that's rare for an LA girl. And it stopped me. And I was just like, I feel you. And I can also sense, especially in your conversation with Marianne Williamson, the urgency of your Dharma without it feeling urgent. So I want to share how much that's meant for me and how you've really helped me open up into more of a relaxed state of well-being in the midst of it all. And then the other thing that I really want to honor you for, because it's literally on my website, is there was a phrase that you used to have on your website that I hear you say, and I know you write and post. I don't see it listed anymore, but I want to honor you deeply because it changed my life. And it is the phrase, the journey inward is the highest calling, or the highest calling is the journey inward. I don't remember exactly how you phrased it, but I sat with that in the hardest parts of my own journey and all the twists and turns of the shedding and the deconstructing and the dismantling of a business and a life I once knew. And a lot of that is shifted and is not recognizable, but I kept coming back to your words. They were a soul balm for me of like, that is what's happening. That is all that matters. And I will know, right, when it's time to shift out of this, but it was really potent, really deep and narrow there for a long time. So I just want to honor you because you've been a beautiful guide in my life in so many ways. And it's really why I invited you, because I want my audience to get to know your beautiful spirit and heart and get to know your journey, because you faced the hardest parts of yourself to get here. And I believe that's what I'm experiencing through your radiance. And I just
Mm.
wanted to take a moment to honor you.
Michelle, thank you so much. I'm just breathing in all of your words, and
Mm.
it's deeply nourishing and nurturing to be seen so clearly. So thank you for that.
Um, I'm just getting the full divine tingles on that one. Just letting that sit because it's true. It's important, and I think a lot of people can project and assume, and all the different ways in which they do. And so that brings us to a little bit of your backstory. It's a question I hesitate to ask because it's so loaded. Like, where do I begin? What do you want to know? Like, but yours is so specific, and I think it speaks to the little girl in you that's still so present, along with the medicine wise woman. So what would you like to share? Part of probably your awakening journey, and I know there's two really important parts, but it started long before. So I would love to hear whatever wants to come through around. Tell me a little bit about how you came to be where you are today.
Ah, yeah, what wants to come through initially as I'm tuning in is, the childhood piece around, growing up in a home with a Buddhist mom who embodied non-duality in this really interesting way. She was one of the most nurturing humans, so loving, so evolved, so gifted. At the same time, she carried a tremendous amount of fear, of pain, of sorrow, of PTSD. She immigrated to the US in 75, the only person from her family, from Vietnam to come here. So I just think about the potency of her courage to physically move across the globe for a better life and to create a life where she could cultivate resources to send back to her family. So she
Mm,
was revolutionary in so many ways in my mind, and the archetype of the warrior in so many ways, and the archetype of the queen in many ways as well. And she
mm,
was my first spiritual teacher in
mm,
this lifetime. And she was my spiritual teacher, of course, as a mother, teaching me in different ways, but she opened me up to the spiritual rituals of reconnection to authentic self
mm.
through intention, through stillness, through the practice of compassion. I remember she would get super activated watching the news and, of course, war and murder and all of these horrendous things out there in the world. And when she would get overwhelmed, she would usher us to the family ancestral altar. And so we would pray and we would
Oh,
meditate and we would, connect with our ancestors and connect with Buddha energy and the energy of Kuan Yin, the female Buddha of compassion.
mm.
And at the time, I thought it was ludicrous because none of my other friends were doing this. Like, oh, okay, mom, again, coming down the stairs in her monk robe.
Oh, cool. Not cool at all then, but how cool now.
Oh, well, now I know. I'm like, I totally see you, mom. I totally get it,
Oh.
understand. And it was the greatest gift. It was the greatest gift. And my dad, much more kind of on the conventional side, but he is a psychologist. And
Mm,
and he brought in the more pragmatic, practical, scientific energy into the house. Also very fun loving and accepting of my mother and loving of my mother. So
mm,
my whole journey has been made of being a bridge of the East and the West.
mm,
And that began with my mother's choice to come to this country. And, she
mm,
uh, I just think one generation later, you see that the progress and the evolution. And so her choice to come here and then her soul's choice to exit early. Well, in my mind, early, but really divinely timed, right?
mm,
So she had a sudden stroke at the age of 57. When I was in my first year of graduate school at the University of Georgia, it was the first time I was living alone. I was diving into my path as a helper, healer, and practitioner. And so grief for me, pain and grief was my portal into my spiritual awakening because of course, I was devastated, but I kept asking myself this question of like, if life is so fleeting in human form, then why are we all here? And that just kept rolling through my consciousness. And that's what guided me back to create a formal meditation practice from the teachings that she brought to me as my mother and my spiritual teacher and all of her ancestors that walked before her. And so in the spaciousness and in the sacredness of meditation, it was where I began to transcend and see that grief was just one part of my human experience and one part of my soul's experience. And I was so much more expansive and so much more vast than the grief that had gripped me for so long. And so I'll pause there because there's something within my Dharma, and thank you for naming that as we began. There is this urgency,
Mm.
and there's a need to embody the urgency in the feminine that
Mm.
allows us to flow in an accelerated way, but with ease. And for me, my personal medicine, my soul's medicine, a big part of it is the alchemy of pain into power. When I say power, authentic power beyond the ego, beyond fear, beyond the projections and all the density we see in the world, but the power of our beingness
Yes.
as we sit within ourselves.
So beautiful and beautifully said, by the way. Um, I feel very much like, again, kindred sisters. I have also learned a lot through fire, a lot through intensity, a lot through, some would call drama back in the day. These days, there's far more grace. But for those that are still learning through more fire, um, and they would like to, or is it even possible from your point of view, to not rewire Dharma, but like to shift the Dharma. So it's almost like, how do we move out of Dharmic patterns, excuse me, karmic patterns into more Dharmic patterns so that we can actually get to why we're here? And it's a funny like side note almost. I heard your conversation with Marianne Williamson on your podcast, Medicine Woman, and I encourage anyone to go listen. We'll link it in the show notes, but she was on a very, very, very strong, like urgent call, clearly, right? And then last night she announced that she's out of the race. And as we record this in real time, but how do we move from knowing there's this urgency? And this is something probably I'm asking on a personal level, from truly surrendering on some level, God's got everything, right? All in divine order. This is exactly as it's meant to. But yet, if each of us could just awaken a little more fully to why we are here and why we chose to be here, and not focus on maybe the karmic patterns, but more the dharmic opportunity that is what we truly want to awaken fully into. What would you suggest are a few ways, or maybe your experience of how to begin to smooth out some of those ripples?
What a great question. This is
We
like a
could hang out
jam.
here all day, huh?
I know. Stay a while. Um, and so I actually posted about this yesterday on my Instagram.
Ah,
At least a part of the message was this is if we can, and this comes also, I want to share from my Buddhist lineage and Buddhist psychology. And when I say Buddhist psychology, you know, that philosophy can be applied to any lens of spirituality. But it's just lessons to live by.
mm,
So if we can individually and thus collectively reprogram our relationship with discomfort,
mm,
actually expand the window of tolerance to lean into our resistance, to lean into our grief, to lean into our pain, and perpetually ask, what are the lessons I'm meant to learn? And we do it with refined consciousness. So the pain doesn't have to obliterate everything in our life, although that's been a big part of my journey because of my particular Dharma. I needed those lessons to be very, very fiery. But for those of you tuning in, when you feel, you know, discomfort, when you feel anxiety, when you feel the wave of sadness, you know, continue to be so acutely aware of those emotional experiences or when you feel misalignment, and you are the alchemist of your life. Like Michelle
Mhm.
shared, like to journey inward is our highest calling. So when we reprogram our relationship with discomfort, we actually embody a greater frequency and power of who we truly are. And we
Mhm.
smooth those ripples out because we catch the lessons before perhaps they need to scream at us down the line.
I love that. And that's a wonderful teaching, to just remember to keep our listening clear and clean and highly discerned. Um, yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. There are a lot of places that I want to go, but what we kind of already are coming up with or through what's emerging is it's honoring the call. And what I'm feeling right now is the bridge that you and I are both walking in one way or another, honoring the call with authentic visibility.
Yes.
Right? And I say that because, I mean, my viewers will see what you look like. You're stunning and you're stunning on the inside, more importantly. And God gave you this, right? But I imagine that has also shown you a lot of places where you get to grow and evolve and expand beyond other people's projections. And then you add that onto a radical shift in authentic visibility with one marriage to another. And I would love for you to share. Really, it wasn't about the marriage, it was about what was coming through and how to really honor why you are here in your dharma at this time. And then we get opportunities to, like you, yoga magazine, Vogue article, and many other globally known publications. And so to continue to honor with deep authenticity the shares that want to come through, but while recognizing that legacy media has not always been our friend, right? So that part right there, I guess, I don't even really know what the question is, but I think you can probably pick up what wants to come through around honoring the call with authentic visibility, which I will say, and without judging, because I don't mean to, there's a lot of people I think they're doing that, and maybe I'm included. I don't really know in this moment. But then we look back and we're like, oh, that's when maybe ego hijacked higher self,
Yes.
right? And so
Yeah.
I actually was just wearing a different mask. I went through that phase of my own experience these past 2.5 years. But then getting really clean and clear and pure and holy on like, let's get super honest. What does this mean? Does this need to be a yes? And if it's attached to any external validation for me, I have to say no, right? Because it has to be that pure. But I'm just curious if there's anything in there that you would like to speak to, because it feels like you might.
Yes. This is
Hmm.
juicy. Yeah, this is good.
Hmm. Yeah.
So initially what I want to share, what's coming through is that our embodiment, the way that we look, this body, this, I call it this wild meat sack that we have, soul in human form, the way that we look, our presentation, there is no coincidence. It is divinely perfect, for all the reasons that your soul chose. And, maybe it's to learn specific lessons. Maybe it's to appeal to different communities. Maybe it's because you are a bridge. There's so many reasons,
Mm,
but for so long, for so long, I hid behind the image that people expected me to be. And I played into that story, and into the conditioning of society around privileging external beauty beyond anything else.
mm,
I remember being, in high school, comparing my body, to every other girl that walked by, right? And judging so incessantly and
mm,
self-harming, and even, having suicidal thoughts because, I didn't fit into a bathing suit,
mm,
the way I wanted to. I didn't have the breasts, the big breasts that I wanted to. I didn't, have the slender body like a, model that my sister had. So it's, we all have these aspects of ourselves that we judge and shame
Mm.
Shame is one of the energies we're meant to alchemize and heal through the specific experience of being in a human body. So there's all of that. And especially being in the healing space, it's very interesting because I got my master's in social work and then went on to be a licensed clinical social worker. I remember, you know, specifically intentionally choosing outfits to go to my social work job right outside of grad school that would mask me, where I would hide, where I would look kind of more dowdy and behind a veil, where I, wouldn't garner attention. Getting attention, it was this catch-22 and this really interesting polarization. I was conditioned to receive attention and to get attention in certain ways. So when I would go out with my girlfriends in college, that was a whole nother story, right? But then in these other areas where we've been conditioned to hide and not be too much and not be, you know, um, you know, glamorous or you shouldn't wear makeup, you're going into clients' homes or whatever it is,
Mhm.
we play into the stories that society conditions us with. And I absolutely did as a licensed clinical social worker, you know, working in the field here in Atlanta and outside of Atlanta. And now I see, as I've evolved on my path,
Mm.
uh, a big part of my calling is to be a bridge between ancient indigenous cultures
Mm.
and the modern world, and
Mhm.
to amplify and empower wisdom keepers. When I say wisdom keepers, I mean, those who really carry the lineages of energy medicine or shamanic healing, meditation. That's part of my bridging, my Dharma.
Mm.
And so that's a part of the reason why, people can't tell, what I am. And I get asked all the time, what are you and what ethnicity are you? And even when I go back to Vietnam, they don't really recognize me as Vietnamese because, of the way that I look. And I've been so ashamed of my
Mm.
external beauty for
Mm.
so long, for
Mm.
so long. I mean, I would even say only within the past, if I'm gonna be honest with myself, like 3 years, I've fully dropped into owning owning that
Ah, good.
because I didn't want to be too much. I didn't want to be judged by my sisters. The sister wound was so
Mm.
insidious, so deeply entrenched that I didn't want to be cast out of the group or judged because in other lifetimes, we were persecuted and killed and um, we were highly unsafe if we were not accepted within the tribes.
Mm.
And so I would hide and it would be this dance of like, oh, my authentic self wants to present in this way, but if I did and like I would get a look or I would get a comment or I get a judgment, then I would shrink back. So it was this, for many years, it would be the stepping out like the lotus, and then it would be a shrinking back. And that oscillation is important. When we step into our authentic self or when we say something that's so deeply from our truth, we may feel a wave of shame. I know Brene Brown talks about the vulnerability hangover after we actually share our truth. And even when it comes to physical appearance, that was the case for me for so many years. And it's important that we tune into the divine relationship we have with our appearance and Marianne Williamson's beautiful teachings and,
Mm.
how she talks about, who are you not to be, fabulous. And
Talented, gorgeous, and beautiful. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure.
right.
And that also has to do with sometimes our physicality. She also is a very beautiful woman.
Yes, she is.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
that is so powerful. I got very weepy when you shared that for the longest time you carried shame about your external beauty. And thank you for being so precise in your languaging. It was like your external beauty, right? Like what you were given. And I've never heard anyone say it in that way. Um, and it's such a beautiful opportunity for anyone listening or watching to see you, anyone who's physically beautiful from a different point of view. And what we've had to play down. I was recently on a stage. It was like a 5-year dream come true type of thing. And I said no at first. And then I said, I need a lot of time to examine if this is still aligned with where I am today. And again, if it had any external validation for me, I couldn't say, yes, that's just where I am on my journey. It's extremely exhausting to be this clean.
Right.
But it feels so right. And that feels most important to me. And so, but I was literally told, dressed dowdy,
Mm.
don't wear those cute outfits that you can wear, like wear baggy clothes. And if I'm honest, I think I followed that a little.
Uh, yeah.
So I'm just like, oh, wow, I hadn't heard you say that. And there's a part of me that probably got worried that could be true. And so I didn't honor my own truth. I not attached to whether or not that thing means anything, but how I showed up in this space and what I wore. On some level, I definitely put on some makeup and some heels. So, I mean, I worked it a little bit, but I also want to speak to that because you're so fun, right? Like, and this is what I discovered right away before I hit record. Like, there's something to be said for, yes, the shedding, the authentic visibility, which I want to get to your yoga shoot that I was so inspired by that you shared recently. And then also you letting go of the extensions and you not having hair and makeup done for you and what that was like, and to reveal that version of you today in a new year, right, in a new timeline. And also I've heard you say you're stepping up and more fully onto the timeline that you are being called. And so with it, it's like this is it, let's go kind of thing, right? But can you take us back to your photo shoot and letting go of extensions? Because I did the same a few months ago, and I don't think enough women are talking about how we can honor the beauty yet also let go of what might have had its time,
Yeah.
right? And I honor the reasons I wore them and all of that, but at the same time I'm like, I still like nice things, don't get me wrong. So it's like I don't want to be pigeonholed, right?
Right. Exactly. Totally. I love this so much. I laugh so hard at this because my branding team, it's like every month I'm like, okay, I should just shave my head. Like, it's like there's
Me
so many.
too. I'm like, am I supposed to shave my head and like be tattooed, like wear
Right.
Birkenstocks and not shave my legs anymore? I don't know.
I'm like, who am I anymore?
Oh my
Yeah.
God, I'm so glad you're saying this.
Yes. Yeah. It's so good. And it can sound silly because we're
But it's
talking about
not. When
it.
you are out there leading people, it's not. When you're going through your full on transformational process from the inside out, it
It
has to be talked about.
it has to be talked about, and nothing is insignificant. It really isn't.
Mm.
So of course, whether it's our relationships or our work, our businesses, our partnerships, our physicality, the way we wear our hair, our clothes, nothing is insignificant, especially when we're shifting, transforming, alchemizing so rapidly within. So
Mm.
yes, the photo shoot, which, is so interesting. I will say this past year has been one of perhaps the most challenging year of my life, in that the acceleration of the shedding and the lessons were so painful and deep, and it was certainly an initiation. So it was the classic non-duality of the incredible accelerated expansion of business, of purpose, of Dharma, and then at the same time, the rapid shedding of people and
Yeah.
a team, lots of shifts in my team. And so the shoot was really interesting because it was timed and it was impromptu, but of course divinely timed, the on New Year's Eve. So the day, New Year's Eve day, and I was asked to be on the cover of Yoga Magazine, which, if you know Yoga Magazine, it's the number one yoga and health magazine in the UK. And I had the honor of meeting and connecting with the editor many years ago. He came on a retreat, a meditation retreat with me to Jamaica, and he's amazing, a barrister turned yogi. So he has his own story. But this shoot was a reclamation. It was a ceremony. it was me showing up just as I am in my authentic beauty without the masks. Because I had just taken my extensions out. I had extensions like in for like 6 years without taking them out. I mean, I would, of course, would get them done, but they were like a part of
Yes.
my image. I mean, people would say like your hair is a part of your brand and a part of that kind of goddess energy that you bring. And I see the purposefulness in feeling feminine and safe and
Mm,
feeling confident, in myself with the way that I felt in my goddess energy when I had the beautiful long locks and all the more kind of done up makeup. And so I don't regret any of it. I think it's just a part of the path, and we connect to what allows us to express in a way that feels safe enough to be out in the world, especially if you are a global leader.
mhm.
So that's where I was for many years. And it came a point where divine spirit was like, show up just as you. You don't
Yes.
need it. You don't need a thing.
Mm,
Did my own makeup and my own hair without extensions for the first time in my life
wow.
when it comes to photo shoots, like
Mhm.
professional photo
Yeah,
shoots.
yeah.
And it's very interesting too, because a part of the shedding, and this is so symbolic, when you look back, you're like, you cannot make this shit up. A, a part of the shedding was, a massive betrayal from my old makeup artist.
Mm,
So, and I love him dearly still. And I
mm,
send him so much compassion, and I know he's, hurting and in his own process.
mm,
But
mm.
symbolically, he symbolized for me the mask, right? So, yeah. So I showed up by he wasn't there. I was with myself, and it was ceremonial in that
Mm,
every movement felt like a dance. I felt
mm.
more empowered with zero performance and zero self-doubt, or how does my butt look or my waist look when I turn this way or that way. It's none of that.
Mm.
It was me as whatever labels we want to use, the medicine woman in her pure essence.
She was, and also what was coming through just now, and I've been experiencing some of this myself, is it felt very divine mother energy. Yeah. And there is a rite of passage as we get a little older, in the linear years of living on Mother Earth of I think you just celebrated your 39th solar
Yes.
return. Yes. And there is something to be said for. I've been feeling that shift myself. It was like with so much in my background of being on air and how celebrated and validated I would be for that, right? And I loved it. And it was important for me to move through that piece to know my worthiness without it. And to also really honor when they came back, even last year, like, we want you back on the show was called Extra. And I could easily say no. It was just like, oh, that's no longer aligned in this moment. So, but it is seductive to get
Yeah.
caught up in those metrics of approval. And I also know that you, like me, are a perfectionist people pleaser, which is the worst combo, right? Can you share about how you began to notice that and then alchemize that? And then I want to circle back to the dowdy version of you that
Okay.
also then had to like look at certain clients in even as recent present time and be like, this is no longer aligned energetically, right? And the shift of that to allow for what was wanting to come through that you're experiencing now. But that's, I think, the discomfort that
Mm,
so many of us are feeling of we're not quite what it once was. We can see what we can feel what wants to come through, but the courage that it takes to honor that particular call is what I'm seeing you embody and model so beautifully.
thank you.
Yeah, so we'll circle there in a moment, but the alchemical process. Yeah, so what wants to come through on that?
Oh,
Uh,
so I want to make sure that that I'm hearing you, the alchemical process around what how we're really stepping into our authentic selves.
yes, yes. Yes. And the shedding and the letting go and the being willing to do that for what is coming forward, what is coming through, what is emerging.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mhm.
It's we have to get really comfortable with death, the death of our old selves. And there's a beauty in that. I love the metaphor of the lotus, that the beauty of the lotus emerges only from the murkiness of the mud beneath.
Mm.
And so I've been through so much. And so we talked about my mom's death. So moving to my second major initiation and dark night of the soul was seeing the reflection of myself mirrored back to me from my first marriage. And that was a marriage that was the embodiment of the aspects that I was attached to outside of myself. So we met in college and it looked perfect and beautiful and it was fun. He played basketball, I played soccer in college. And so we kind of ran with the athlete crowd and had a lot of fun. And just, it was comfortable. It was familiar. I got a lot of validation from my family, from society, from, friends that this was it. This was the thing to continue down the path with. And, he has a lot of similarities, some similarities to my biological father. And so, of course, they became friends and it was like, oh, everyone approves and accepts. And so it must be aligned, right? Is
Oh,
the
yes.
story. So we got married and continued our life and we traveled a lot and it looked perfect on the outside. It was the, shiny kind of life that everyone that, resume wise, people were conditioned to want, to desire.
It was
And
like the equivalent of my TV, right? Like,
yeah,
oh, right, everyone loves you. Look at you, the role model of perfection.
right, exactly. Oh,
Mhm.
that must be right. Until my energy systems were saying differently. And I kept denying, I kept looking away because of of course, shame. And I kept repressing the voice inside of me that was like, something's not right. I mean, even the moment he asked,
Mm.
it was set up so beautifully. It was on the top of a ship in Halong Bay in Vietnam, and my sister and my dad were there. And so it was just the four of us. So, how can you say no to it?
Oh.
I remember the resistance inside when I said yes.
Mm.
And so that took me on a whole journey because, the journey is not linear. We have to get lost so we can be found. And we have to see where we choose to lose ourselves and we choose to self-betray. And I self-betrayed over and over in that first marriage. So very purposefully so. And so going back to when I began to see and feel really that my energy centers were shutting down and
Mm.
I could barely get out of bed to go to my therapy office to see my clients. And it just, it was screaming at me at that point. And that's when I started to explore energy medicine, and shamanic healing. And so it led me deeper onto my path. But it was, it was really that relationship. When it comes to perfectionism,
Mhm.
that relationship was my mirror of
Mhm.
perfectionism. And so I'm grateful for the lessons. But it was, they were quite the lessons because when I chose to leave the marriage, there was a complete uproar in my family, in my friend groups, but really primarily it was my family, I there's so much to say around it, but the stories that are created around a woman leaving a seemingly perfect marriage, it almost is more believable for people that because there were all sorts of wild stories. Oh, she's brainwashed, she's in a shamanic cult, because at this point I was, I had gone to Peru to experience ayahuasca and to be on my spiritual journey. It
Mhm.
was more believable that I was brainwashed and in a cult
Mhm.
than it was to believe that I was actually leaving an unhappy, misaligned marriage.
Mm.
That's really spoke to the entrenched conditioning of, my family and some of my friends, the ones that are just dear to me. Of course, they saw me and they know me, but it's all purposeful. It's all medicine.
That's where I was going to circle back to, but you just answered it. And thank you for coming full circle. It was like, wait a second, created that on purpose for you then to be able to catch it and
Yes,
liberate yourself from those old, outdated ways of navigating this particular life so that you could get to the Dharma,
exactly.
which is what it was always anyway.
Always.
But you spoke to something that actually ties into the part of where I did want to go next, which is our businesses are shifting right now. And you can feel it. There's an acceleration and a massive expansion in the world of what East is representing and all of your beautiful offerings and potential new location, on the West Coast and all these exciting things. Is that okay to say that?
Yes. Oh,
Okay, I was like, because if not, we'll edit it out. Okay, good. I was like, wait,
no,
I
no,
heard that before. Wait, hold up.
we're good.
Thanks.
That's perfect. Yeah.
All right. I love keeping it really real. But I know I experienced this about 2 years ago when the world was beginning to awaken, right? Thank you, COVID. Thank you for all of that. Sad that it had to get to that and where it is now, but there is a beautiful shift happening as well, right? So where are we going to place our focus? However, there's something to be said for the grief that I know that you've carried and that I've carried around the clients that would no longer fit with the most authentic version of ourselves, the friend circles. I mean, the splits and the splinters have been very real. And then, right, like I know you're in a beloved relationship with Jeff, your husband and partner, but to be able to then continue to see life and reality through that same lens or shared lens of perception is extremely rare.
Mhm.
It's extremely rare. And from everything that you've shared, it sounds like you really have that with him as a partner in life and in business, and what you are creating for humanity as we enter into this golden age, truly. But I'd love for you to share about that journey that everyone can say now, look at her on the cover of yoga and the way that you look and all this, but all this is the alchemical process that we were referencing a few minutes ago of how can you share or shed light on anyone that's listening or watching that might be going through that process too, not quite where I was, not quite where I know I'm being called to be, the difficulty in navigating even just financially. I mean, I know for me, I had several clients where those private calls, they paid all the bills
Yeah.
and they were no longer aligned. And a lot of people are not aware of that because I don't tout my private client business, my mentorship business, but it all but dried up,
Mhm.
right? But I didn't go back. It was like, no, I didn't stop what I was saying or sharing. I couldn't, just like you, there was a mandate on my soul. And so for that, I'd love to just hear your process and being able to hold the grief, but while also understanding, almost like Divine Mother,
Mhm.
this is necessary for the mission.
Yes. Yes. I'm just tuning in. And for those of us who are here to create massive impact and change on the earth together, and I feel this beautiful sisterhood with you, and I'm just really, really grateful to have this conversation.
Thank you for saying that. Me too. Really, I'm getting the full
Yeah.
news. Thank you.
Yeah. We must be willing to let go of anything that stands in the way of the mission. And also, we're meant to work with other humans who are also have that capacity.
Mm.
So a part of the beauty, the heart-wrenching grief, the change, the evolution of my journey, my professional journey, has been to lean into the acceleration, which meant a perpetual letting go, letting go, letting go. And every time I let go, I was reminded of what unconditional love actually is.
Mm.
And that lesson will always guide me forever, like in the rest of this lifetime in particular, because I know I am so clear of what I offered them. I'm so clear of the meaning and the connection that I was meant to have in that person's life, whether it was a client I had for, a couple of months or someone who worked with me internationally and individually for years. You know, I it's almost this you're accelerating forward and you're touching, you're illuminating. I think of this image, Michelle, of
Mm.
being in an airplane at night and
Mm.
you're looking down on a city, and if you're this bright light and then you touch and then all of the lights begin to come on and
Oh, I
just
love that.
spread
Yeah.
far, far and wide.
Mm.
I look back and I see how my students, they're all like they have community with each other because they were worked, with me on, in my programs or on retreat or in my women's groups or mentorship groups. It's like, yes, you see the beauty, even though for the warrior that is moving forward in
Yes.
an unwavering and unapologetic way, our humanness needs to grieve, but the soul is celebrating. So we have to hold those two in divine grace for ourselves.
Ah, so beautifully said. I just want to give that a moment. Yeah, holding that in divine grace, that feels like the field that's being co-created right here, and also by many, many others that choose to be in collaboration and choose to see what is really happening from almost that divine gaze, divine grace point of view. So it makes perfect sense that you, or to even like scan out from like an aerial point of view. Um, yeah, thank you for sharing that. Which brings me to, I'm just so emotional today. Wow. Well, I woke up feeling tender physically anyway, but it's so perfect that we connected because this is such an honest, vulnerable conversation that I don't think a lot of people really talk about. And we present as, yeah, less and less these days, but like I got it all figured out, and that's the least, right, of what's happening. Like none of us know. Like, and I guess that's the question that I want to begin to close out with is, you have a steady partner who's a fierce warrior himself, an anointed shaman, and from everything that I can gather, just a really beautiful soul. And you've met your match, your beloved, and I know you are twin flames. You've shared very openly, and I encourage anyone to listen to more and more about what that means. It's not always easy, but it's what was meant to be for this life. But I don't want to put any energy on any fear. But there's also something to be said for kind of piggybacking on the urgency that we've been discussing and honoring the call, the real call, the authentic call. What is Easter? What do you and Jeff have, or what do you have thoughts around what's really happening and where humanity gets to go, or the liberation that is really up right now that some would say we don't really know? Like I've really truly learned to just say I don't know. I'm surrendered. I don't know about even this life. I'm fully surrendered, and to your point, I'm held in unconditional love, Christ consciousness. I know this. And so if I just stay in that space, my heart, divine grace,
Mhm.
then I just trust my path. I trust where I am guided, and I trust that I can listen and honor it now because I've learned to. But do you have thoughts around, whoo, this is a mission of all missions? It is. Or, I mean, do you just try to stay in the moment? Like, I'm just curious how you navigate. You have big dreams, big visions, and it's global. It's beyond this earth.
Right.
It's ancestral. It's everything. Like, I think you can probably get where I'm trying to go. There's not a real pointed question, but what comes up for you when you really get present to what we are navigating as a collective for those of us who can be with it and or meant to be with it?
Mm. It's a yes and.
Mm-hmm.
Yes and I want to begin by acknowledging that we know so little. I know so little. You know so little. My beloved partner Jeff, we know so little, and that keeps us humble. Humans, it's like, okay, we're just doing this damn thing the best that we can, this
Yep.
human life. And also, so this is the yes, and there's a mission beyond words that flows through us. And when we as we've been together, for the past 7 years or so, almost 7 years, everything
Mm.
that was made of fear has burned away. And it's, I feel like we're at the kind of dregs of that over the, because we're still integrating 2023.
For sure.
And that mission is unwavering. It's unwavering. At the same time, it's important to temper that yang energy of moving forward, forward movement, creation, yang, like pushing forward in an accelerated way with the yin of the feminine, which
Mm.
is what I know that that's a big part of my Dharma as well, is like really holding that energy, embodying that energy that is no different from the energy of Pachamama, Mother Earth, and her elements and beings. And so, can we see the essence of ourselves reflected back to us? And that helps us to surrender, like you said, surrender into the flow of where we're being guided as instruments of the divine.
Mm.
So that's the perpetual thing, holding those two energies simultaneously. And of course, we're human. We get lost all the time. We forget all the time. So
Yeah,
it's not about not getting lost or not forgetting. We're perpetually forgetful of our essence. We're perpetually forgetful of our Dharma, but it's how quickly can we course correct
yeah.
and bring that masculine, feminine energy back for the greatest good of the collective, because we are in a massive shift and reprogramming from individualistic consciousness into collective consciousness, which is why you see the shadow, we want to call it the darkness, coming into the forefront in a more overt way. Maybe you're feeling something in your life, people who are tuning in, but we're also, of course, seeing it on a global scale. And that's purposeful for alchemization. But on an individual level, in our practice and our personal transformation journey, can we hold both energies?
Yeah, the equanimity that my beloved teacher Ram Dass speaks about all the time, right? His teacher Maharaji was like, Ram Dass, love everybody and tell the truth. And Ram Dass would say, I can't tell the truth. I judge everybody. And he was like, Ram Dass, love everybody and tell the truth. So then Ram Dass was like, okay, I judge the heck out of all of you and I love you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. But like that's kind of a perfect place to button up my last question that I actually didn't plan on asking you, but this is what I woke up thinking. It was like something, it felt like it was really important for my soul. And I'm just curious if this has ever occurred to you. And it was, I've been going through about a 2.5 year season ever since the beginning of, where I was supposed to awaken next. Definitely ayahuasca awakened me deeply in 2019, but that wasn't even the very beginning. It happened in a Tony Robbins seminar 2 years earlier, interestingly enough, when I realized that TV was not the be all end all for me at all. It was just my little 5 year old little girl that, yeah, plagued by perfectionism, people pleasing, wanted to matter. So I got to play out that and it was important. And then it just wasn't anymore. But it was, I know that the mission that I'm on is important. I know that the most important part of my path was doing the deep work that I've been doing and I'm so devoted to. It's exhausting and it's exhilarating and I can't change it. I'm just on that path. And at the same time, it's hard for me to go beyond this now moment with goals or visions or dreams right now because I'm just like so surrendered to what is in the highest and best for my life and for the best of all, right? So I'm just curious. And what came to me this morning was like, of course. It was like I was in this conversation with God. And it was like, of course, my dear, because it's no longer attached to the old ways in which it was validated.
Mm,
You got that. Because I
yes.
was like, wait, what? And I knew deep down, I was like, yes. It was like, of course, because television and being on all the fancy stages with all like the famous motivational speakers that I used to do all that with, even just 3 years ago. And so nowadays it's like what I do with no partner, no, it's like not, I'm not complaining about any of this, but there's no victim in any of this. I'm just like, ooh, I have to know the worthiness.
Mhm.
I have to know who I am and remember it and live that because the old rules no longer apply to how I'm showing up anymore. But yet most of my community that I built my business and who were following and a part of my success through those standards, they're not on board with this.
Right.
You see what I mean? And
Yes.
so it's like, does it matter? Am I spinning my wheels? Because at the end of the day, all that really matters is how I'm showing it at the present moment with you. And yet I also know there's much more. And I've made it clear I'm available. I would like to continue to stay on the planet. I don't want to exit, right? So I'm very clear on that. But it's also this really interesting space that I find myself in that I've never shared out loud because that thought just came this morning. Does that resonate? And or is there anything you would want to add to that or even provide maybe clarity for me because you're such a beautiful medicine woman who picks up a lot of threads? I'm just curious. It's a
I love
wild way to begin to end, but it just wanted to come through.
I love that we're ending on like this is like an infinity sign right now. With
Exactly. Well, you're going to have to come back.
yeah, yeah, exactly. We'll revisit the conversation. Yeah, I mean, you bring up it's such a truthful illumination of awareness around what it means to be an instrument and to evolve. Because when we're in one, we'll call it a frequency or a state of consciousness. We're in, just say your TV days when you were, connected with those high profile people and in front of the camera in that way. Again, there's nothing good or bad. It's just it's a frequency that's a state of consciousness that's going to magnetize people to that state of consciousness. Now, as you're continuing to be in this accelerated evolution, um, it's like the rules begin to change. The paradigm shifts, the story shifts, the frequency shifts, and
Mm,
it you begin living. This is what's coming through as the fundamental shift in what you shared. You begin living from an internal sense
mm,
of worthiness from your authentic power versus a source of power that is completely an illusion.
mm,
And that, my dear, is crossing the threshold, the valley of death, we can call it, of the old way. And as people get closer and closer and closer to that threshold where they're being forced to confront their shadow, their ego, their attachment to validation, their attachment to the external, because I see how devoted you are to
mhm,
your authenticity, your soul, your intuition.
mm,
Some will move through the valley into this place of freedom from the illusion, and many won't because of what it takes and what it's bringing up and how their ego is flaring and projecting and just in battle for safety, the illusion of safety. And so that's where we are collectively. And I know, you've experienced that in your own way and your own journey.
That
Me
was
too.
so beautifully said. And there was something about the way in which you said it. And maybe it's because I've been so excited and waiting for this moment to connect with you that, and again, I had no idea that thought would come through or question would be asked because I didn't have it until this morning. It was like I began to get more clarity the more that I avail myself to full, authentic surrender. What must I know? What do I need to know? And so you saying it in that way is so resonant.
Mhm.
It's so deep and so rich. And it really speaks to when we are in the state of consciousness that then creates a new frequency, as I understand what you've shared. And it's so easy to follow from the way that you shared it. And this is obviously what you do. You are a medicine woman, transpersonal psychotherapist. Like this is your space. But imagine if more and more and more and more women, especially in the divine feminine era, are having these conversations. And then we get to take this out as consciousness first into our communities. This is how we create new earth.
This is how we create new earth.
This is it right here.
This is it.
Not in the future, it's right now.
It's right now. It's right now. It is claiming that power right now. Yeah.
Oh man, this was Really beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Just honor you so deeply. And is there anything that you wish you'd been asked or that you feel compelled to share as we begin to close out, including any invitations that our listeners or viewers may want to join you on? Anything at all?
Mm, yeah. Um, there's a there's a lot, shifting. There are going to be different trainings and workshops that I'll be offering as women in particular step into their embodiment of what I call your Dharma or your medicine, your soul's purpose. And that's where we just talked about it. My specialty is guiding women through that valley of alchemy so they then carry that medicine.
Mm.
So
Yes.
I humbly say and know from my soul, I'm a Dharma activator. And I
Mm.
that work
Sounds good.
just with just such reverence, really, such reverence. And so I invite you all to join us in Peru for Expand Peru this September 21st through 29th, which is that it's an activation of your soul. And
Mm.
we literally journey through the Sacred Valley with our shamanic family and receive the rites of the Moonai Key. And there's an opportunity, if you're called, to sit with Grandmother Aya and essentially get initiated into the shamanic lineage that both Jeff and I
Mm.
are a deep part of and have been initiated into to bring, again, as the bridge to bring forth to the West. And then also, this hasn't launched yet, but I'm taking names of people who are interested to be on the VIP list to perhaps join me in Belize for a medicine woman immersion where I'll be working alongside my sister and teacher, Rosario Ponte, who is a Mayan elder,
Mm.
and we just have such a beautiful sisterhood. And so we'll be activating that medicine woman that wants to come through.
Interesting. What is the medicine you'll be serving there?
She's going to be literally moving us through the jungle to learn about medicinal plants from her native land. And I work with psilocybin when I bring people there.
Okay, that actually that speaks to me. So I'll put my name on your short list.
Great, great. It'll
Yeah.
probably be, we're looking at August. So
Okay, yeah, I saw that you did your quintessence retreat there last year, and it was beautiful. And the timing didn't work for me, but that's beautiful. And then I also appreciate that you said for Expand Peru in September that they will have an invitation if they'd like to sit with grandmother ayahuasca, but it's not required.
no, no, it's really for those who are called to the medicine. But we,
And are
some who partake and then others who don't.
and are there other medicines on that trip for people to experiment with, or do you work with psilocybin there as well?
No, we don't work with psilocybin there. Mainly it's
Yeah.
ayahuasca, but we also, there we haven't officially decided, but San Pedro is also
Mm.
that
Okay.
thing there.
Interesting. So good. I mean, listen, Mother Ayahuasca for me, she's just been a most important teacher.
Mhm.
And I do feel like for this life, we may be complete, although I just got a little perk. My last integration, which I'm still integrating 2 years later,
Mhm.
um, I'm still integrating from my first sit 5 years ago.
Mhm.
Things will come, and I'm like, that's what that meant. And I'm finally ready to be with it or
Wow.
understand it. But the last message that she offered me was, don't book anything until or if you are called.
Very wise.
And that upset some people that we had one in 6 months from then, but I had to honor that. So to our whole conversation, just that unwavering dharma and just really being true to ourselves.
Exactly.
Where can our listeners and viewers catch the most that they can about you? Which platform?
Yeah, so I would say on social media on Instagram. So it's at I am Lena Franklin. So I share all of the offerings and
Yeah.
upcoming invitations and just, more about my life and work. So,
Well, that's where I came across you. So, I mean, technically it was through Ceremony Circle, but this is how we find one another, right? And so, anyone who's listening, just like I was listening to Lena, a year and a half ago on Ceremony Circle or whenever that came out, follow the nudge if there's something here. There's such depth and beauty and wisdom in what you have to offer. So, I honor you so deeply. And I have a feeling there will be more and more in an in-person experience. So, I'm just really grateful in advance for that. But I want to say thank you for your time and for bringing your full heart,
mm,
magic, and medicine to Fire and Soul.
mm, I'm deeply honored to be here. And thank you for your sharing your tremendous gifts with the world. And Fire and Soul is, a force, a force. I've really enjoyed connecting with the show. So
Thank you.
more to come.
Mhm.